Okay, this one's nowhere near as heavy as Matt's, so don't worry. You can kind of put your brain out of your head now and let it rest a little and breathe. We're going to talk about the Enlightened Perl organisation, which is an organisation that's only recently come to pass in Perl. It's formed by a group of like-minded people. As Ian already said, my name is Mark Eating. I'm the Managing Director of Shadowcat Systems. I'm also the co-leader of North West England Perl Mongers, and I'm the Director and Secretary of the Enlightened Perl organisation, and I almost forgot who I was. Strange really, it's on the back of my t-shirt as well. So, why Enlightened Perl? Where do we come from? Well, the actual name, and this is where I get a little anecdotal, comes from a conversation that Matt and I had about 3.5 years ago. We were looking at the state of Perl as it is today. We were looking at a lot of the projects, and we were saying how mature it had become ever since around 5.6. And we were looking at some of the practices that the projects had actually developed in order to be successful. At the time, we were actually looking in regards to working on a new project almost, which was called Catalyst. But we were also looking at it in relation to a project called Mapo. What we decided at the time was there was a shift and a sort of resurgence of new type of Perl, which Matt was calling the Perl Renaissance. Now, I'm not going to go into why I said to him that was a bad idea, but I said it was more like an enlightenment than a renaissance. The Enlightenment is a completely different period, typified by being a period of revolution, of modern thinking. There was the French Revolution, there was the Industrial Revolution, there were various terrorist acts in the colonies. But at this time as well, there was a change in the way that modern thinking was done. And the modern way of thinking is to actually separate certain divisions and think in a certain manner. Enlightened is also a word that can mean a higher plane of existence and a higher plane of understanding. So enlightened seemed to fit more to me. So what did the Enlightened Perl groups want to do? Well, what they were, the projects all had similar things. First of all, they wanted to write an extension of the Perl and the Perl object orientation. They also wanted to make stable and production-ready code. And this was very really important as far as I was concerned, because I come from this from a management point of view. Most code projects scare managers. They're absolutely terrified of programmers. They're absolutely terrified of the way that programmers think, because programmers often think in a very short term. They think of what they're working on right then, and then they think of where that's going to be 5 minutes from now, and the next possible thing. What managers think of is, how stable is this? How long is it going to last? And when do I have to pay these bastards to rewrite it? So what you have to have is a stable and production-ready system. You have to have tests and people to build those tests and to run those tests. But it's not test-driven development, it's more test-driven deployment. Rather than just having a system of continually changing things, you would have a system of supporting how you change things. You would have every release would have a series of testers and developers. They will all have to have mailing lists and IRC channels. These are very important in projects. A mailing list gives you an area where you've got a set of frequently asked questions can be answered inside the mailing list. A lot of the where the development came from, if you want to look at research of a project, can be answered from the mailing list. You can grep through the mailing list to answer a problem, even before you start to ask any questions. IRC channels are important for keeping constant communication in terms of development for people who are distributed over a wide area. The project should have documentation. This is a huge area for anybody working in the development of a new project. If you look at many of the projects that are on CPAN, the area they lack in the most is in the documentation. You can't find anything. And if you ask a question on an IRC channel, you'll often get shouted at because you're asking such a low question and you didn't go looking for the mailing list. Or you didn't look at what they call as the docs. And if Matt wrote them, that's an interesting point. There should be a project plan and a roadmap for your development. It shouldn't be that what determines how the project is developed is the next interesting thing you saw. There should be some idea of where you are going to. Even if you do see something interesting, if Perl 6 were to be released tomorrow, every project should not suddenly become Perl 6 based. It would kill a lot of the projects that are in existence, and this often does kill projects that are in existence. It often kills development by big companies or new fledgling companies if the development team is allowed to simply add new features. as they feel they must, it will kill the project being developed, because you suddenly end up with an unstable mess that cannot be used next month because they're going to change it again. So there has to be a roadmap, and if you're going to add new features, they have to be added to a roadmap and worked out as a series of. It also has to be a step towards Perl 6, even if Perl 6 is never released. It has to be a step towards some of the thinking that's gone towards Perl 6. Quite a lot of the Perl developers who think on a very high level are developing features inside Perl 6. Many of the things that have been thought about for Perl 6 are already coming into Perl 5 because they've been seen how they're being done. So the Perl 5 people start to integrate them into their projects. It is not that we're replacing Perl 6, it's more that you're stepping towards it. What they're not is they're not an experiment, they're not a prototype. They're basically commercial projects. Experiments and prototypes have their uses. They're in fact essential. DBIX class started as an intellectual problem, I think. The point where it became a project is when it was discovered that it was being used in industry. At that point, it was released onto CPAN, and Matt started scouring for committers to help him support the project and to test any new feature. There shouldn't be a hobby or a toy. Hobbies and toys are fine in their place, but you don't want them in commercial use. And it shouldn't try to be Perl 6 and Perl 5. It's not trying to replace Perl 6. And as we're in competition with other languages, as mentioned by Matt, it's kind of fun to look at other languages, see how they did something, and to steal from it, and use it yourself. It's solving a problem. If they solve it in a more elegant way than you do, what's wrong with using that? It's also looking at how they approach the problems. So, what are the aims of the organisation? First of all, improve the public parts of Perl. It can look a bit disorganised to new people coming to Perl, and it can look like there isn't one overriding think or feeling or movement. Create support material. This is mostly to support new people coming into Perl, but also to support those developers who don't know about other projects. Create accessible installations of libraries and applications. These would be installer files, so it would be quick. Perl on a stick is one. Vanilla Perl, Strawberry Perl, and the Catalyst installer, all designed to get you up and running as quickly as possible. Grants for code development and anything that helps Perl adoption. These are not specifically aimed at existing Perl writers, they can be aimed at people new to Perl. If it means getting a new project started and aiding the uptake of Perl, then that's the thing that we want to support. And producing articles and white papers for management, i.e. people like me. Aiming it at a language that they can understand, telling them why it's important to have the Perl projects developing, why it's important to have the software developing, and why it's important to have this type of development. Finally, integrating those business and organisations together. The community and business tends to be two separate sides of a coin, and never the twain shall meet. Developers don't like management, management think developers are a bunch of greasy bearded layabouts. It's often a thing that they're often very separate. I think the Perl community attracts a lot of stick for it, possibly because some of them are greasy bearded layabouts. Sorry, I forgot the long hair, greasy bearded layabouts. Why should you join them? Well, any company that's using Perl really has a trouble when it comes to getting staff. As Matt said, there's a lot more call for jobs. But often the only people who are able to look at a Perl developer, interview a Perl developer, is another Perl developer. There is absolutely nobody has any idea. Sponsored organisations can give support to the modern practices in development. Individuals themselves can show commitment to having modern Perl practices, and you get access to the working groups. Quite a lot of the people doing on the more modern projects running in Perl are actually in Enlightened Perl, working on the same sort of things and in the same sort of communities. Getting access to them is essential if you want to develop your skills, if you want to develop it inside the community. Any questions?
Perfect timing. You should try coding list if you want to know being like, if you code list, everyone will assume that you're a drug smoking hippie. Basically, it's even worse.
Manager. trust me, most of the managers think you are all joint smoking hippies. Or as I've been heard to reply, they're mumblers. Because you ask them a question, they go, bits of coke snippet. My usual response is, you actually tried listening to them, take them to a pub, give them a beer, then ask them. You find they'll talk to you then, sometimes at length. Anybody else?